Randall Ray Pokrzywinski was wrongfully convicted of having committed a murder during a robbery in the first degree. He is serving life without parole. 3 or 4 days before the 13th of June 1987, Vernon Edwards, victim, came over to David Dean Walker's house, the co-defendant, wanting to buy some cocaine. David was not there at the time, so Vernon Edwards was trying to get Tammy Austin and Dana Jones to do some crystal meth. They didn't do it. Tammy Austin went to take a shower and Diana was in the living room. When she noticed that Vernon Edwards was not around her anymore, Diana got up and went to the back bedroom and saw Vernon Edwards staring at Tammy taking a shower. Diana, terrorized, ran away and went to find her friend Randall and told him what Vernon Edwards was doing, sexually harassing Tammy Austin and her. Randall went there and grabbed Vernon Edwards and told him to get out of the house. The same day, like around 10 o'clock in the morning, Randall was over his older half-brother's house, Wayne Sisk, and Vernon Edwards came there to buy some marijuana from Randall's half-brother. He asked to Wayne Sisk if he had pounds of marijuana. Wayne Sisk told him yes. Vernon Edwards asked if Wayne Sisk would front him the 2 pounds. Wayne Sisk told him no, so Vernon Edwards said that he would put his car up until he brought Wayne the money for the marijuana. Deal made. Vernon Edwards left. Randall didn't see Edwards until the 13th of June. On June 13, 1987, Randall, David Walker, Tammy Austin, Connie Cobb Pokrzywinski, Mike Worley, Diana Jones were having a barbecue at David's house at the time. Everyone was drinking and doing drugs. They were in the backyard of David Walker's house. Tammy Austin, that lived with David, came there. She said that Tammy Faust was inside the house, saying that Edwards had just raped her. They all went inside the house and Tim Bird and Tammy Faust were there. Tammy was crying and Tim Bird said that Edwards raped Tammy. So Randall said that he was going to Edwards' house. Tim Bird told to Randall that there were other people at Edwards' house. So David, who was worried for Randall, said that he is going to with him because of those dangerous people being at Edwards' house, and told Tammy Austin to get his shotgun for protecting themselves. Mike Worley said that he will drive. They got to Edwards' house in New Market. There weren't other cars there. David Walker said that he will go see if there is anyone there. So he went to the door. David Walker came back and said there is no one there but Edwards, so David and Randall went back to the house. Randall was sitting in a chair and David was standing up. David asked Vernon Edwards if he had the money he owed him. Edwards gave him his $200. David Walker walked up to Edwards and hit him a few times and called Edwards a rapist and sick fucker. After that he turned to Randall and said, "Kill this rapist motherfucker," and Randall shot him. They got back to David Walker's house. David said to Tammy Austin, Tammy Faust, Tim Bird, Connie Cobb Pokrzywinski that Randall shot Edwards. David Walker said that Vernon Edwards won't rape no one else. Randall doesn't remember the rest. He thinks he went to bed or he passed out. On June 14, 1987, Randall was arrested. Retired Lieutenant Charles Richard Franklin, sergeant at the time, wrote Randall's statement while he was intoxicated. Randall had took around 100 milligrams of benzodiazepines, around 20 Valium tablets, all at once. He had a blackout and wasn't able to read, write, remember, understand what was happening around him. Those hours don't exist in his memory. Sergeant Franklin and investigator Whittier wrote whatever they wanted. They took advantage of the moment. Knowing Randall wasn't sober, they pleaded him guilty of capital crime. They took the other statements. They knew what to write since Tammy Faust and David Dean Walker were arrested before Randall. The statements were almost the same. This can't be possible. How can 3 people declare 3 similar versions, which do not describe the true reality of the facts? The lack of important details of the story and completely non-existent dialogues. That did not happen without making arrangements. The officers orchestrated it. And how does an intoxicated person give a confession in an unconscious state? How can something wrote by to law enforcement officers while a person is vulnerable, unconscious and intoxicated being considered as a spontaneous confession? This false confession is the result of malice by the officers. Randall couldn't give that statement because it's not real, and by being intoxicated he couldn't have read what the officers were writing, who could easily have lied to him about what they were writing. Charles Richard Franklin was promoted to lieutenant after Randall's conviction, then downgraded and promoted again because of his repeated misbehaving, and he was caught doing something in another case. A law enforcement officer who has a history of misconduct and corruption determined Randall's wrongfully conviction. Tammy Faust's statement was coerced. She testified the false and was set free because of a deal with the district attorney Bud Kramer, who forced her to lie after having threatened to prosecute her.
On June 13th, I went to Vernon Edwards' trailer with my daughter. Edwards asked me to stay and eat with him and a couple of friends. I agreed and then left to take my daughter to a babysitter. Upon returning, I and Edwards began drinking beer and snorting cocaine. Later, I went into Edwards' trailer and Edwards followed me. He started jerking my pants down. Walker also threatened everyone present, saying that if we told about the homicide, he would kill us.
This statement was false. Tammy Faust was an addict, and she went to Vernon Edwards' trailer for buying drugs. She was sexually abused by Vernon Edwards. He wasn't simply jerking her pants down. She said it to 7 people: Randall, David Dean Walker, Tim Bird, Diana Jones, Mike Worley, Connie Cobb, Tammy Austin. Why would a girl tell to 7 friends that she had just been sexually abused, and as soon as she is arrested, interrogated by officers, then she completely changes her story and becomes a witness who testify for the prosecutor and is released? They accused David Dean Walker of threatening, but he had already threw away his shotgun in the Flint River, and he was the one who, when they came back from Edwards' trailer, said, "Randall shot Edwards. He won't rape no one else," a person who would never threaten his own friends, and the girl who was leaving with him and was sexually harassed by Vernon Edwards. The next day, Bird and Faust related what had happened to Sergeant Franklin. This is inaccurate. Faust was arrested as the last seen at Vernon's house. The threatening accusation was an excuse for explaining why she didn't go to the police commissioner's office before. Tammy Faust and Tim Bird were the only witness heard. During the trial, Tim Bird contradicted Tammy, and he said that she did say to everyone that she was raped by Vernon Edwards, not just jerking her pants down. The trial wasn't fair. Randall was wrongfully convicted of having committed a murder during a robbery in the 1st degree. It was a voluntary manslaughter caused by the heat of passion, because Tammy Faust, Tammy Austin, and Dana Jones were sexually harassed by Vernon Edwards. It wasn't a premeditated murder, and there wasn't a robbery. And there is material objective evidence. The investigator found $1,500 to pounds of marijuana, a large amount of crystal meth, cocaine at Vernon's house, the clear evidence that there wasn't a robbery because he wasn't robbed. It's proof that David Dean Walker didn't steal his $200 that Vernon Edwards voluntarily gave him. In fact, he was not being pointed at by the shotgun. Vernon Edwards owed David more money. The $200 was a part of it, but anyway, David didn't touch anything. If this really was a robbery, shouldn't the house have been burglarized of all money and drugs? The money and drugs were there, but they didn't touch it. Why? Because there wasn't a robbery at all. There is another material evidence. It shows that Edwards also owed other people's money. The detective didn't just find those $1,500 and huge amount of drugs, but even found a book. This book contained all the information regarding his debts and loans with the corresponding names of the people. These names had to be deciphered as they were not complete. Names that revolved around drug trafficking and gun violence. The people Tim Bird talked about to Randall, which prompted David Walker to take his gun and give it to Randall and then follow him with Mike, followed by Tim and the others. Those people were also at Randall's preliminary hearing. Why? They were likely observing the ongoing trial and were making sure that no one had ratted on them. Not too much time later, the death penalty verdict was overridden. David Dean Walker received death threats by these people. These events led us to think that this trial had external influences and that this miscarriage of justice was not an error due to lack of evidence but a real malicious act. And this is not a baseless accusation. Randall's trial was unfair. The jury was tampered. His mother, Lula Pokrzywinski, and his aunt, Glenda Berry, married with Charles Berry, former retired captain of the Criminal Investigation Division of Madison County Sheriff's Office, saw Vernon Edwards' mother, Aline Edwards, talking with two female jurors during a court recess in the restroom. Bruno Procopio, an investigator for the Madison County District Attorney's Office, spoke with a juror during the trial, and everyone was aware of it. The district attorney, Bud Kramer, subordinated perjury. He forced Tammy Faust to lie after having threatened to prosecute her, a deal in exchange of her freedom since she was arrested as the last seen by thirds. Her declaration was in fact contradicted by Tim Burt, who said she was raped. This was the evidence of the prosecution, proven as perjury.
Remembers the start of his career as Madison County DA, spending a bulk of his time prosecuting child abuse cases.
I was a young district attorney. I was elected DA when I was 31, but I kind of wasn't afraid of anything.
Prosecuted cases for years. He served in the United States House of Representatives, but for Kramer, all of that pales in comparison. Good work he did at the end.
The evidence the district attorney brought to court was without any criterion of objectivity by Tammy Faust's false declaration, proven perjury. There was Randall's statement, which was false, wrote and supported by two law enforcement officials with a history of misconduct who committed perjury.
We could have protected it. We handled that interview process. I handled that process terribly. And court was over with, sometimes successful prosecution, sometimes not. That job, looking back on it, is the best job I ever.
Mark Sandlin, Chief Deputy District Attorney of Madison County, was at the time Randall's public defender. When Lula and Glenda found out about the jury tampering, they saw it in the restroom. They pointed this out to Mark Sandlin, who told them that what they had seen was nothing. They had to leave it alone and say nothing about it. They pressured Mark Sandlin to bring it up in court. Poorly represented, without the presence of the witnesses who saw Aline Edwards talking with two jurors. On appeal, it was considered a baseless accusation for Mark Sandlin's incapacity and unwillingness of representing Randall. The overall legal representation was inadequate and caused procedural problems with the appellate claims. The well-founded jury tampering claim regarding Bruno Procopio, investigator of the prosecution, talking with a juror as matter which was raised at trial but not raised on appeal and should have been, the same was therefore barred. If that hadn't happened, Randall would have gotten a new trial. The jury's verdict was death penalty, which was overridden by Judge John David Snodgrass because of the material evidence raised. The evidence established his innocence of robbery, and so of capital crime. Randall keeps being incarcerated, serving his 35th year of life without parole for shooting his friend's rapist when he found out about the rape, a voluntary manslaughter caused by the heat of passion.